throughout this video, I'm going to be summarizing and highlighting the main points that RFK gave during his announcement on Friday. So it first started out with him talking about why he originally ran as a Democrat and then why he went over to be an independent. And the big part was because he felt like the Democrat Party had departed from their traditional values such as civil rights, anti-authoritarian government, and government transparency. He criticized the Democratic Party for orienting themselves to more of a war supporting and censorship, big corporations, corruption, and he explained that those are the reasons that he left and ran as an independent. He then went on to describe the challenges he's faced running as a independent, such as having to secure 1 million signatures. 1 million signatures to get on the ballot. And then he went on to praise his volunteers, 100,000. He said 100,000 volunteers who were out in all weather conditions, rain, snow, hot weather, super windy conditions. And they were out campaigning on his behalf. He then, after that, went on to go critique the Democratic Party and then the mainstream media. And I'm going to talk more about mainstream media when I discuss his big talk about censorship. So when he critiqued the Democratic Party, he was mentioning a lot how about they were allegedly rigging the election by trying to keep him off the ballot. I'm pretty sure they took him through trial, court trials, and he also brought attention to how they were allegedly doing the same to Trump by putting Trump in jail. He also mentioned how that they were trying to keep him out of debates. If you remember, and the same with the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, he said that the Democratic Party was working together with the mainstream media on trying to keep him out of debates. And I'm sure if you remember when Trump and Biden did their debate, from what I was seeing, there was a lot of, especially through conservative outlets on social media, such as Instagram and then YouTube, and then even some of the news as well, that they felt like RFK should have been on that debate stage with Trump and Biden. And so RFK just said that Democratic Party and the mainstream media worked together to keep him off that debate stage. So he talked about those few things, and then he went on to go talk about he talked about 3 main points. First one was censorship and free speech. The second was the war in Ukraine. And the third one was the chronic disease epidemic. So I'll talk about that last one in just a second. But the first one, censorship and free speech, he spent a long time on that. Obviously, he talked a lot about the news media and then Trump as well. As for the war in Ukraine, this one he didn't spend a whole lot of time on. He spent most of his time on the free speech and the chronic disease epidemic. When it came to the war in Ukraine, he mostly discussed how the U.S. was participating in a proxy war with Ukraine and Russia. And he criticized both U.S. neocons and Russia, blaming the U.S. for escalating the conflict by expanding NATO and breaking peace agreements. So as for the chronic disease epidemic, that was a heavy focus of his. He's been labeled as a conspiracy theorist, crazy, I'm sure if you know enough about RFK, then you've come across this stuff, people labeling him as that. His big concern was a lot about how the food and the physical fitness of the younger generation is just terrible. And in my opinion, I think it's terrible too in most, in the States, obviously, and up here in Canada as well. So those were his 3 main points that he discussed: the censorship and free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the chronic disease epidemic. Now, the important thing is that RFK didn't end his presidential run. He's kind of pretty much suspending it, actually. He's encouraging voters to still vote for him. Obviously, after his speech, in my opinion, I just don't see him getting the full vote and end up taking office after that speech, especially after this next part. I'm going to mention this next part, which is obviously going to make a huge factor in why he might not receive as many votes. So he still has his name on the ballot, but he did mention how he is going to be taking his name off the ballot in the swing states, in 10 swing states, he mentioned. Because according to polls, he mentioned that there were polls saying that him being on the ballot would hand the election over to the Democrats instead of Trump. And so it would actually be better for Trump and for Kennedy too. And I'll tell you why it's good for Kennedy too if Trump wins. It will be good for Trump if RFK isn't even on the ballot. Because if RFK is on the ballot, then Democrats are going to win. At least that's what his main point of why he is taking his name off of 10 states. So the U.S. citizens can still vote for RFK. However, in the 10 states, he's not going to be having his name on the ballot. Now, this is the really interesting thing. He talked a lot about Trump and his support for Trump. And he highlighted a lot of, not highlighted, but he mentioned how they don't agree on things, on policies. But they generally have a main focus together, like when it came to core values. And that is actually enough for RFK to support Trump, as I'm sure you saw in the news. He's actually officially supporting Trump. And what's really interesting is, well, Trump was giving a speech in Arizona, which I believe is one of the 10 swing states, giving a speech in Arizona. Trump brought RFK on stage, and, well, I'm going to show you the video actually right here. It's actually really cool.
Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome a man who has been an incredible champion for so many of these values that we all share, and we've shared them for a long time. I don't think too many of you people have heard of him. He's very low-key. He's a very low-key person, but he's highly respected. He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Man, whoa. And he deserves it. He deserves it.
So RFK mentioned how he and Trump are going to work together on having free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the chronic disease epidemic. So that's pretty much it when it comes to the RFK speech that he gave on Friday. So in conclusion, he gave his reasons on why he ran as an independent, gave his reasons why he doesn't like the Democratic Party and mainstream media, gave his main 3 points on what he's mostly running on, and now he's supporting Trump, and he's actually working with Trump now because Trump did actually ask him to enlist in his administration. And one thing I do want to highlight what RFK did say during the speech is he did say, like, quote, "In an honest system, I believe I would have won the election." When he mentions the honest system, when he says honest system, he's talking about the mainstream media, the censorship, and the Democratic Party trying to allegedly keep him off the ballot and keep him out of debates. He also mentioned when criticizing the DNC during the first day, Trump was mentioned 147 times. And he went on to say, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? And essentially just say, like, the Democrats don't have any policy they're running on. Instead, that they are just running on defeating Trump. Where Trump is running on policies, the Democratic Party is running on just defeating Trump. And so he mentioned that. He also did highlight that in contrast, during an RNC convention, Biden was mentioned twice over 4 days, compared to 147 times in the DNC on one day. So that's pretty much it. That's the whole summary of the RFK speech. If this is the type of content you like, go ahead and subscribe below.